So the British government is further decreasing British citizens' right to free speech, and to an extent, in a way, it's kind of vague. It's I don't think it's the intention, but it's what's happening. Denying children and denying people under the age of 18 access to content that is related to mental health awareness. And I think that the way they're implementing it, from what I am seeing, that the way they are implementing it is dangerous, counter to free speech, and is going to end up causing more harm than. So essentially what this is related to, what I'm talking about is the Online Safety Act of 2023. Now, the Online Safety Act of 2023 was passed in 2023 in the UK, but it's getting more and more updates as it goes on. And just recently, I believe on 25th of July this year, so a few days ago at time of recording, it added further protections specifically to protect children from harmful content. Now, the United States has also done some stuff about this recently. If you're a person who watches certain types of videos, you'll know that in a lot of states in the United States, have to provide ID. You have to provide some sort of ID confirmation that you are in fact over the age of 18, or in some states, I think one, in order to access that content. And that is essentially what this act is trying to do for the most part. It's to set up an age gate, and it's to compel websites to set up an age gate to access certain types of. But from what is occurring here, from what is being seen, from the actual impact of what is going on by this act, from what it's actually caused to happen, there are websites that don't fall within what should be considered harmful to children that are being forced to either block UK or just go down entirely because of the way that things are being enacted. Now, according to the UK government and according to the Online Safety Act website, which I'll link in the description below, providers' safety duties are proportionate to factors including the risk of harm to individuals and the size and capacity of each provider. This makes sure that while safety measures will need to be put in place across the board, we aren't requiring small services with limited functionality to take the same actions as the largest corporations. Effectively, what that is saying is that the goal is to make it so that smaller organizations, smaller companies, smaller websites, smaller providers that don't necessarily have the funds and the means to enact the strictest of regulations aren't going to be required to. But from what I'm seeing, just from a few quick checks of certain websites, certain small websites, that is not the case. That this is being interpreted or applied so loosely that even these small websites are being forced to comply or risk massive fines and legal action that would be incredibly detrimental to them. And that is leading to some really benign websites, some really benign pieces of media being denied to the entirety of the UK because these websites can't really effectively implement an age gate, or at least being denied to people under the age of 18, despite the fact that they shouldn't be. Now, obviously, some of these things that are being blocked should be blocked. One of the websites, there's a website, blocked.org.uk, that I'll also link in the description, that lists a lot of the websites that are reported as being blocked in the UK. I put on a VPN. I switched my location over to the UK to see how many of these are actually blocked, because this is all being based off of user reporting, it seems like. Some of them aren't being blocked to me, at the very least. I have myself set to Dockland, UK, wherever that is in the UK. Some of them that I've checked are not being blocked, or it just doesn't appear that they're being blocked. Some of them absolutely are being blocked. And some of them that I didn't even bother to click on, I'm like, yeah, I get why you're blocking this, because they're adult websites. They are providing adult content that is not allowed to be viewed by people under the age of 18. But other ones are not. For instance, janitorAI.com. Now, this is one that I have mixed feelings about, but janitorAI.com is an AI website that basically allows the user to have interactions with an AI-generated character that can have, complex, quote-unquote, emotional interactions. Now, do I think it is beneficial for children to be accessing these AI websites that allow them to create pseudo-social relationships with what is effectively a computer, what is AI, and not a real person? No, I think that is I think that that sort of interaction is dangerous to the development of children. But I also think that that is something that it is up to the parents of the child to regulate and not the government to regulate on behalf of the children. One, I'll start with this. I would be more approving of this act and more okay with this act if all it did was require internet service providers or tech providers to in some way allow parents to limit what can be accessed, and particularly internet service providers, too, because they're big. They can handle it. It's a lot easier for them to limit what content their children can access. But in this case, it is putting the burden on the individual websites, on the individual providers of the service to somehow age gate and make sure no one under the age of 18 can access this, which is unduly stressful and also takes away the ability of parents to decide what is and is not right for their child. In this case, do I think this is, if I had a child, would I want them to be interacting with a AI that is going to pretend to be their friend and potentially stunt their emotional development as they grow into adults? No, I wouldn't want my children to be accessing that. But that is my right as a parent to decide whether or not they are going to, not the government's right. So that's one website. That's the one that I'm most like, okay, I can kind of see where they're coming from, I guess, with this. And then another one that makes no sense why it would be at risk, but they felt like they're at risk, so they had to shut down and block the UK, is candypatterns.com. This is a website that provides candy patterns or patterns to do beadwork. That's what it is. It's a website that provides patterns to do like beadwork, or where is it? A website to view and discuss patterns for making candy, bracelets, and other crafts made with pony beads and string. I went to this website when it wasn't blocked, when I wasn't routing my VPN through the UK, and that appears to be all it is. I wasn't able to quickly find anything illicit, anything adult, anything inappropriate that was on this website. It's just a website that provides patterns to make little candy creations or bead creations that look like pixel art. Neat. When I switched over to a VPN, it's blocked. Sorry, you have been blocked. It has a few different texts of why, saying, oh, it might be a glitch, it might be because of an automated spam report, blah, blah, blah. But on the second line, if you live in the United Kingdom, this block is a result of new legislation which leaves us temporarily unable to operate in the UK due to the risk of fines. We're required to comply with a long list of demands, some of which are too expensive or complicated to implement for such a small website, so we have been left with no choice but to block UK users. This is a website that provides art patterns, and not inappropriate art patterns, not adult art patterns, nothing like that. Just, cutesy little art patterns from what I can see. But because of the vagueness of the law, because of the vagueness of the act, and because of the risk of fines and legal action that the act imposes kind of willy-nilly, they are being forced to shut down. They are being, well, not shut down, but they're being forced to block the UK. Anyone whose internet is coming through the UK will not be able to access this very benign website because of the broad-reaching nature of the way it is written. And finally, and this one hits close to home for me. This one hits very, very close to home for me. But UrbanDead.com shut down. UrbanDead.com shut down because of this act, because of the Online Safety Act. They shut down on the 14th of March, 2025. UrbanDead.com was an oddly large part of my childhood. It was a browser-based game that, I don't know the best way to describe what the game was, but essentially it was on a massive grid of, a city that was, a block grid of the city, and you moved around in the grid, and you had a limited number of turns each day, and if you paid like $5 one time, you got more turns each day, and you regenerated your energy faster and blah, blah, blah. But you were navigating around in a browser based, not quite text based, but not 3D or even really 2D in the typical like 2D gaming environment to survive in a zombie apocalypse. And you can either be a zombie or you can be a human. And if you're a human, you got killed by a zombie, you would become a zombie until someone bothered to revive you. And then there's this whole community of people that they'd set up, hey, zombies that want to get revived, go to this location and people will come to revive you and blah, blah. And it was a really, really fun game. And this was actually the first thing that actually caused me to hear about the Online Safety Act, but I didn't really want to talk about it at the time because I didn't really know much about it. Because I got a burst of nostalgia earlier this year, and I went to go to the website. I was like, I'm going to start playing this game again. And I saw the announcement that it was going to be shutting down. because of the Online Safety Act. And the reason that the Online Safety Act is causing here's what they say. Here's their exact quote. The Online Safety Act comes into force later this month, applying to all social and gaming websites where users interact, and especially those without strong age restrictions. With the possibility of heavy corporate-sized fines, even for solo web projects like this one, I've reluctantly concluded that it doesn't look feasible for Urban Dead to be able to continue operating. This game was run by one guy named Kevin. This game was amazing. This game was awesome. But because there was a method to interact with other players through the spray paint, and I think if I remember correctly, there was like an ability to kind of talk to each other, kind of thing. Like if your character was in the same block as someone else's character, you could type something and they would hear it. Because of the fact that players can interact with each other, and the institution of age restrictions and the ways they'd have to do it and support it and blah 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 was so restrictive and so difficult. It was not something that this independent developer, this dev, effectively was going to be able to implement, and the game got taken down because of the incredibly like vagueness and increased restrictions. These are all kind of petty. These are all small ones that aren't big, but it gets a little worse. It gets a little worse, and I'm going to try to talk about this in as not vague, but as kind of unspecific a way as possible because of the nature of the content, specifically because of YouTube restrictions about the nature. But here is from the UK government website that's talking about the Online Safety Act. As of 25 July 2025, platforms have a legal duty to protect children online. Platforms are now required to use highly effective age assurance to prevent children from accessing videos or content which encourages self-harm, suicide, or eating disorder. Platforms must also prevent children from accessing other harmful and age-inappropriate content, such as bullying, hateful content, and content which encourages dangerous stunts or ingesting dangerous substances. Platforms must also provide parents and children with clear and accessible ways to report problems online when they do arise. A full explanation, blah, blah, blah. This might make sense to you. Obviously, stop them from accessing adult videos. When the United States implemented that, it was annoying. But, like, I got it. I understood why. It's like, okay, this is content that children aren't supposed to be accessing. Let's actually force the companies that are providing it to stop children from accessing it. I understood it. The fact that you have to provide some sort of ID or something is a problem because of the fact that these databases get breached all the time. These databases get screwed around with all the time, get information stolen from them all the time. So the more information you have to provide, the easier it is for your identity to get stolen. And that causes issues, that causes concern, that causes a lack of trust in the consumer to provide that information to a website, and potentially makes some websites just unfeasible. If it's something that might have content that needs to be blocked, it makes them unfeasible because it's going to be incredibly expensive for them to do that, and consumers aren't going to want to provide that information to some random website. I mean, consumers don't want to provide that information to a big website. How likely do you think Facebook would just shut down if Facebook all of a sudden said, hey, you have to provide us your actual ID, sign up for a website? And Facebook is huge, but the majority of the user base would be like, no. So that makes sense. But that one makes sense to me. Hey, blocking those websites, providing some sort of protection, whatever. Content encouraging self-harm, suicide, or eating disorder. The problem with that is, how do you determine encouraging? Because what I see happening, and this is anecdotal, this piece of evidence I'm about to provide is anecdotal from my editor, who is from the UK. But what I can see happening very quickly is, and because this is a constant discussion anyways, despite the fact that there's scientific research that proves the opposite, a lot of public opinion and legislation and the old fuddy-duddies that are in different legislative groups in different countries seem to think is that if you say the word, that it is going to increase the likelihood. That if you discuss it at all, it is going to increase the likelihood. So what I can see happening, and what is being shown, at least by my editor, what he has provided me with, and I'm trying to find more information on. Unfortunately, the nature of the fact that websites are being blocked makes it hard to really research which ones are being blocked because I can't find them if I have the VPN on. But what's happening is information that is just discussing mental health and discussing those sorts of ideation and discussing suicide awareness being blocked. and being prevented from being accessed by anyone under the 18 and potentially at all. Because what some of these smaller websites are doing is just saying we can't implement the age gate. We don't have the money, we don't have the resources, we don't have the infrastructure to effectively implement this age gate. So we're just going to block the UK entirely so we don't get sued. So a lot of these websites that just don't have the infrastructure or the ability to are just not going to provide that content at all. And the ones that do provide that content that is about mental health awareness, that's about suicide awareness, might end up just blocking, or might end up blocking the UK, or might put it behind an age gate that would require a young person that is going through something and just trying to find resource and trying to find awareness about it to get help, but might be afraid to talk to their parents yet because the inherent bias and the inherent, like, just social aspect about it might be too embarrassed or scared to bring up to their parents, or maybe they just don't have supportive parents and that's part of the problem. They won't be able to access this information. They won't be able to access this information at all because the UK is going high into the right with this concept of protecting children in a way that, one, a lot of it should come down to the parents. A lot of the stuff that's being blocked here should come down to the parents' decision on what or not their child should be allowed to access. I'll also add as a side note, or not even as a side note, just as another risk of this. One of the things that the Online Safety Act aims to target is misinformation and disinformation, as well as like hateful content and bullying content, which we all know the UK has strict regulations about cyberbullying and everything else. The risk of that too, I can very well see occurring, is who decides what is harmful content, what is bullying content, and who determines whether or not it is misinformation or disinformation. This leans again into the 1984 aspect of all of this, where if the government is regulating this, say there's a politician that's running for office in the UK, and that politician has enough clout over the organization or the agency that is regulating this, and then someone comes out and says, hey, this person committed this crime and they're a bad person and we have all this information about them that says they're a bad person, but that politician has enough clout or has enough sway that they can push the organization to say, oh, that's misinformation, that's misinformation, that's not allowed, you have to get rid of that, you have to block that, you have to put it behind an age wall, it has to go away. Or And now they're controlling what information people have access to that can get very, very corrupt, very, very 1984, very, very tyrannical, really quick, double plus good type shit. Big Brother's always watching. Or conversely, like they could say, oh, these people are all protesting this horrible behavior I have. They're going online, they're going on Facebook, they're going on Twitter, they're going on Tumblr, and they're talking about what a bad person I am because I've done these horrible things. That's bullying. Block them. Punish the websites. Give the websites massive fines. Make sure that the entirety of social media is either supporting me or fined into oblivion. You can't have that sort of vagueness when it comes to free speech. You can't have that sort of vagueness when it comes to what people are and are not allowed to say. You can't regulate speech to that degree and not be concerned about the way that it is going to be abused. So that's just another aspect of this that is incredibly concerning. So one of the examples that my editor was able to give me of a website that he knew about that he can no longer access because he's based in the UK and he can't even find the website anymore is a website that discussed different methods of self-harm and then all the downsides associated with those methods, and apparently has done a lot of good to discourage it. Because one, and just to put a little bit of actual science behind that, an actual bit of research that has been done by people that actually know what they are talking about, there are several articles that you can find. There are several scientific articles that you can find online that specifically research and discuss whether or not talking about these topics is harmful or beneficial to the people that they're being discussed with. So the one I'm going to specifically cite right now, and I'll link a few other ones, but this is a meta analysis. So what a meta analysis basically is in science, if you're not aware, a meta analysis is when a researcher gathers together a bunch of different research, a bunch of different individual articles and publications that have been put out, scientific publications that have been put out, and looks at the conclusions and the data from all of them and the methodology from all of them and creates a greater conclusion based off of conglomerating. So they don't do any unique research. They don't do their own study. They take a bunch of other studies and they say, yeah, in the majority of these studies, or in a lot of these studies, in the vast majority of these studies, this is the actual result that we're seeing. So they're really good things to read if you're trying to get an actual broader picture, because with any topic you can kind of find, but a lot of times with any topic, you can find, if you read 100 articles about, I don't know, GMO foods or something like that, you'll find like 99 of them all say the same thing, and then one of them will say something contradictory, and then people that want to, contradict the greater public opinion will cite that one article. But meta-analysis kind of overcome that because they look at the research as a whole. They don't look at an individual article. They look at the research as a whole. But the one I'm reading right now from is The Benefits and Risks of Asking Research Participants About Suicide, a meta-analysis of the impact of exposure to suicide-related content. And I'll link this. You can read the whole thing. You can read the abstract. You can read everything if you want to. But basically, it's looking at whether or not discussing suicide with participants increased or decreased their actual ideation to commit the act. I'm going to skip straight to the conclusion. And this was published, real quick, this was published in the 5th of July, 2018. So it's a fairly recent-ish article about it. It would have been recent enough that when I was in college and I had to find sources that we would have been able to use this as a source. The findings of the current meta-analysis indicate that exposure to suicide-related content during research studies is associated with reductions in suicidal ideation and a lower likelihood of attempting suicide after participation. Ethical decision-making about research should be based on a risk-benefit analysis of the best available evidence and be guided by the principle to offer as many protections as necessary but as few as possible. And then here in the discussion, results showed exposure to suicide-related content led to significant, albeit small, reductions in levels of suicide ideation from pre to post-exposure. More of a participants experiment with suicide. Yeah. Anyways, basically what it's saying, and the discussion says it's significant but small reduction. Significant just means it, in this case, in a scientific study, just means it has this statistical significance. It's not just an anomaly. It actually has, across the research, across the study, there's an actual statistical difference between the results, between the pre and post. It does say it's a small reduction, but it is still significant. So what that means is discussing it is not increasing the likelihood of ideation. It is decreasing the likelihood of ideation, even to a small amount. By providing these resources, by providing people the ability to read about it, look at it, discuss it, it's actually lowering the likelihood of it happening. But now, because of these regulations, some of the most at-risk people, teenagers and young people, people that are in a developmental stage that is going to make them more likely to be at risk of this sort of behavior because they're going through hormonal changes, they're going through social changes, they're going through all these different things that are stressful and challenging, and maybe they don't have the necessary tools or understanding or just context and perspective to be able to process well. When you're a kid, when you're 15, 16, 17 years old, every bad thing that happens to you seems like the worst thing in the world. I know when I was going through high school, there were several instances when I was in high school and prior to, like when I was in middle school, I'd hear about it happening in high school, of people within my general age bracket, in some way hurting themselves, whether or not it was, successfully or attempts or this or that, or whether or not they ended up in the hospital or whether or not they ended up in a grave. Because that's just a part of your life that you're probably the most likely to be impacted by these things, and a part of your life where the information could be the most helpful to you. And it's a hard thing to discuss with your parents. It's a hard thing to discuss with adults, especially since there is a stigma around it. So maybe the best place you have to go to is the internet. Is let's go online and look at this and see what people are saying and see if there's a place to get help. And now, because of this law, it appears that more and more resources are going to be taken away from the people that need them the most. I get the impulse to be like, we need to protect children and you young adults from information that is dangerous, from certain sorts of content, adult content, actual adult content, not adult content in the concept of, oh, this is a serious topic, because that's up to your parents to decide what is and is not a serious topic. But the broad reachingness of this and the fact that there's websites that aren't even related to adult topics that are being forced to shut down means or risk huge fines means that there's a lot of resources that could be really helpful to kids and young adults that they might be getting blocked from or might have trouble accessing. Or even if they turn 18, maybe they don't want to give their ID over, because I wouldn't want to. I'm not going to give my ID over to a website. Screw that. Why would I? There's too much risk in that. And now they're being blocked from access to the information because of it. And just, hey, to the people that don't maybe have the specific concern for that, to everyone out there, it's like, whatever, this doesn't affect me. I'm an adult. This isn't going to affect me in any way. I can still access all these websites. I don't care about your kids, whatever. This is going to end up having a greater impact. There is no way that there's no world that I see that this will not have a much greater impact on the things that you might actually care about. Because, for instance, YouTube, that this video is on right now, is a massive website. It is a massive website that has a lot of content on it. And anyone who's posted videos on YouTube knows that, like, a lot of times when I post a video, there might be a little thing that pops up that says, we're limiting your monetization on this. We're blocking this. This is age gated or whatever. It doesn't happen to me too often. Usually it's like playing video games. Like when I played Oblivion, there's a scene where the Emperor gets, killed pretty graphically, and it age gated that one and lowered the monetization on that one. But now this is getting even more restrictive. Where now, especially if this is requiring YouTube to take a more and social media websites in general to take a more proactive stance against this, because right now, at the very least, YouTube has a reactive responsibility for content that needs to be blocked, for copyright content, for certain content that is inappropriate, that the government says, hey, you're not allowed to post this. They have a reactive responsibility, which means they have to, if it's reported to them, they have to get rid of it. But they don't have a proactive responsibility. But if this law starts creating a proactive responsibility, and we have seen in the past that things that are done in the UK and the EU can impact globally, because it's just easier for YouTube or for some of these websites or for some of these companies to just get get in line across the board rather than just say, okay, we're going to restrict this to this one country kind of thing. But even if not, it's still going to affect the UK. If this creates a proactive response for YouTube and social media websites to block certain content, then those automated bots, and you'll see big YouTubers too all the time talk about, yeah, this video got blocked, and this video got age gated, this video got demonetized because of something stupid, even though it shouldn't have been, and blah, blah, blah. And I had to fight it with YouTube, and sometimes they say no and sometimes they say yes. If this creates a more proactive response, then those automated bots that decide whether or not content is going to get blocked might become even more restrictive, and it might make it even harder in the content creator space, and it might limit more of what you can see, and it might require content creators to be more careful with the words that they say. Like, I fully expect that this video might, right here, I might get the notification that it's been, demonetized, or it's been age gated, or it's been this or that, because I've said the word suicide multiple times. But I'm going to keep that word in this video. I'm not going to block and edit that word in this video, because I think it's important that that word stays in the video, because of the message that discussing it does not increase the likelihood, it decreases it. Studies have shown. And that people in general, especially the most at-risk people, need to have access to the tools and the resources to learn about it and to hopefully get better and get care, regardless of whether or not their parents are giving them specific approval. Because maybe their parents are pieces of shit. Maybe their parents are caught in the Stone Age, where even discussing the issue is a stigma to it. Maybe their parents are the cause of those feelings. Who knows? They have the right to have that information and to get help. And now the UK government is deciding to parent on behalf of parents and take that away from them. So I'm going to keep that video in there. But all this to say that even if you don't care about the morality side of it, even if you don't care about the ethical side of it, even if you don't care about that, you don't have kids, you don't care about the kids, whatever your moral implications are, this also has the ability to impact websites in general, social media providers in general, streaming services in general, where now they might have a proactive responsibility, which means they're going to start restricting content even more. And it's almost becoming like I hate to say this, it's becoming more 1984, where the government is deciding what information you have access to. The government is deciding what information is allowed to be provided to you. The government is deciding what you can see and what you can enjoy and what you can, share to a degree that is not appropriate, to a degree that is not okay. There's certain things where I'll say, yes, I get why they want to establish some sort of protections, but in this case, it's not falling in line with that. It's entirely just tyrannical. But with that, I'm going to end that here. Please, if you've gotten this far, leave a like and subscribe. I know this isn't my normal content one. I'm trying to branch out the content I talk about, the things I talk about. I don't want to just be the guy that, trash talks Nintendo, but also I think this is a very important topic to discuss. So of course I'm going to be discussing it. Leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content from me in the future. Make sure your notifications are turned on. I have memberships turned on. I'll admit right now, I haven't been super great about posting membership stuff. That we have a few things in the works that we just need to get posted as members only videos. Every dollar of the memberships will go straight to my editor. So eventually I can hopefully hire him on full time. That will allow me to put out more content faster, because now it's like, okay, we don't have to have it. That will be his job. So every dollar up until the point where we've reached an agreed amount where I can hire him on full time from memberships goes straight to him. And the stuff is going to be up over there that will discuss what you get with the memberships. But yeah, please leave like and subscribe. And if you want to leave a membership, that goes straight to Mammoth. Anyways, bye.